In the early 2000s, there was an aesthetic to new 3D platforming titles. They were animated, they were colorful, and they had a clear design differentiating good guys from bad. A lack of polygonal detail gave rise to harsh color palette shifts when it came to tranquil versus dark and edgy. Some studios went for a more iconic twist on the childish aesthetic by making it more mature, but many played it safe with a more age-neutral approach. Some games towed the line and appealed to a more teenage demographic. All along the way, there was an expansion on the mechanical movements of these games as well. 3D platformers being an essentially new genre in the 5th generation of consoles, we're coming into a more experimental phase in the 6th generation. In the midst of exploring what identity platformers could take on visually, there was a studio that took some of the most popular aspects of movement from the most successful innovators in the space and refined it to be what I would say is the most slept-on 3D platformer of the 6th generation of consoles. Acclaim Studios, known for their work on a vast library of games going back to the 80s, was constantly innovating on the developer pool they would utilize, given the quickly changing technology of the time. So moving into the 7th generation, it was nothing new given their foundational publishing of games such as Mortal Kombat under Midway's development, as well as the Turok series under Iguana Entertainment. As the 3D arena exploded in the early 2000s, they would utilize their Austin developer branch, formerly known as Iguana Entertainment, to bring to life what I would call one of the most slept-on 3D platformers of the 6th generation. The action-adventure platformer title, Vexx. Now, I would say Vexx was not overlooked by the gaming community for no reason. It does play as a very derivative creation. One aspect of this is its story. As far as the originality goes, it is pretty paint by numbers. A civilization, in its ambition towards progress, opens up an access point to an ancient dark power. This dark power is controlled by a dark lord/wizard-like character, and the hero is part of the oppressed group of civilians that come under the oppressive rule of the Dark Lord. His family falls victim to the dark power, and he vows revenge. The hero then finds a magical weapon that can grant him the power to fight back. In hero's journey fashion, you meet a mentor-like character and embark on a journey to access the forces of darkness and take them out once and for all, before they unleash apocalyptic levels of darkness onto the land. Per the old mentor's instructions, to power the rift to access the Shadow Realm, yes, this game is original enough to even call the dark hellscape the Shadow Realm, you must collect the hearts of wraiths, which are the creatures that make up the Dark Force's essence. Ironically, this mentor was actually the Dark Lord in disguise, and he was using you to open the portal between your world and the Shadow One in order to devour the world. He is able to steal the MacGuffin that can be used to seal him away from the dark, mysterious lady we see at the beginning. But as we can gather from her narration in the beginning of the game, she is actually one of the last remaining members of the race that founded this civilization, and is the one trying to undo the rift that was created years ago. After you finally make it to the innermost cave and complete the ordeal in hero's journey fashion, you manage to throw the MacGuffin back through the rift to make the world right, but fall deeper into the Shadow Realm, yet rise from the ashes to fight the core threat to the world. At least that was the concept of a sequel that never came to be, given that the studio was shut down a couple of years later. The funniest aspect of this game, that is blindingly more obvious looking back on it, is the visual style choices that were imitating more popular IPs of the time. For one, this dark-hooded magic woman has pretty much the exact same character design of Raven from Teen Titans, and given that this game came out around the same time as the cartoon series, there was an obvious fan service element here. I mean, just look at how her character is modeled. I find this more amusing than anything. The more glaring thing that makes this game's visual style feel like it was created by a boardroom is how it blatantly rips off two major IPs in the same genre that came out right before it. To a lesser extent, the beloved platformer Ratchet & Clank that came out the year before Vexx had a protagonist with strikingly similar body proportions and facial features. Rodent-like furry cheeks, thick eyebrows with large animated eyes, a mousy nose, and pointed ears. I guess you can say many of these elements existed in the 6th generation platforming characters as well, but to say that the success of Ratchet & Clank had no effect on the design elements for Vexx would definitely surprise me. More so than this observation, however, is how the designs of Vexx mirror image the 2001 platformer Jak and Daxter even more. Not just the characters with their pointy long ears, but the plot of a peaceful race of people being invaded by monsters from a dark realm that are led by a dark wizard who wants to consume the land using some kind of dark essence. Not to mention also that one of the main characters from that game also takes on a rodent style, so perhaps both a mix of Jak and Daxter were inspiration for this new platforming experience before the release of Ratchet & Clank? Who knows? But the movesets and platforming style definitely have some crossover elements to them as well, like the uppercut accentuating the jump, for example. There were also some elemental powers that made me think of eco-related abilities in Jak and Daxter. The manner in which you got specific power-ups involved standing on a platform whose color represented that kind of magical ability. Hell, even the health drops from dead enemies reminded me of eco. All in all, this game is about as original as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It was the most typical story structure, it had that dark, edgy aesthetic of the era that it came from, and design elements that are ripped straight from popular games that came before it were definitely very prevalent. So, if all of these aspects of the game were done by others to a more popular extent, why would I title the video "The Most Slept On 6th Generation Platformer"? Well, Vexx copy-pasted many popular design elements of its time, but it stands alone on its gameplay design in several ways. It also improves, or at least innovates on several aspects of level design and movement mechanics we had seen in more fundamental 3D platformers up to that time. The tutorial of the game encapsulated the basic moveset you will have through the game, but growing skillful at using these tools is what makes the game so unique and fun. Super Mario 64 was the father of 3D platforming mechanics, and pretty much every successful 3D platformer has taken elements of this game's moveset. Vexx does this and adds a twist, and that twist is instant trigger-assisted movements and attacks. Taking the idea of adding a long jump to every exaggerated movement horizontally and vertically is a much smoother process than the well-timed long jump in Mario games, as well as the triple jump. Using the left trigger, you can charge your movements before making them, and more accurately and quickly navigate obstacles. Adding an additional jump to the vertical charge allows for that additional height without having to time a triple jump. Much like Super Mario Sunshine did the year before Vexx, it integrated the C-stick camera into a more controlled navigation of three-dimensional space. It did copy the fence texture hanging traversal mechanic from past Mario games on top of the flipping doors. It, of course, includes the platforming staple of climbable wall textures as well. These mechanics make sense to include given Vexx's main claw-like tools for traversal, however, and just seem like a good thing to copy when crafting diverse challenges involving vertical movement. Speaking of movement, there is a swimming mechanic that I feel like innovated quite nicely on the Zora swimming mechanics from Majora's Mask. Instead of normal slow swimming mechanics that you see in most 3D games, Vexx uses the energy from his claws to propel him forward underwater. This allows for much quicker movement, but since the propulsion is controlled by the player and allowed to be toggled on and off, it allows you to adjust to your position easier than auto-propulsion mechanics in the past. This diverse yet quick pivoting of movement in water traversal and on the ground movement allowed for unique adaptability in time trials, climbing challenges, and boss battles. Nothing Vexx did mechanically was extremely groundbreaking, but It tightened up a lot of ideas that other games created and made the player take on a very skill-based growth to handle new levels. Speaking of levels, Vexx is a shining example of crafting solid platforming challenges on diverse stages that continue to challenge the navigation and combat abilities of the player. It takes on a Mario 64 hub world in terms of how you travel between levels, but instead of picture frames, they are just straight up rift portals that lead to different parts of the world. Also, in 3D Mario fashion, the goal of each level is to find enough collectibles to advance to the next level. Instead of stars, you are looking for wraith hearts, and instead of coins, you collect orbs. Collect 100 orbs and you get a heart. Also, there are 6 golden heart jars on each level that also give you a heart when you find them all. They are more or less the red coin challenges for Mario. The technological limitations of the time definitely feed into why this hub structure was made this way, given that levels were basically open world experiences in and of themselves. Timberdale was a great starting level, introducing you to the main mechanics of traversal and combat. The game has slightly cryptic descriptions before each level challenge that would hint as to where to go to find a heart. Unfortunately, unlike a game like Mario 64, Vexx does a bit too much signposting. Literally, by having little arrow signs point you in the proper direction to go for each challenge. Some of the challenge descriptions are pretty cryptic, so I understand why they did it. However, I think that if you are going to give hints as to where to uncover the challenge, you might want the player to have the satisfaction of figuring it out for themselves, like we all did in Mario 64. The level design is often pretty good at telegraphing where things in the hints are anyway. So I would say this is not a hit to the level design as much as the developers appealing to the lowest common denominator. If there was ever a remaster of this game, I would hope there would be an option to turn on and off the signs, but anyway. Timberdale shows you a glimpse of what kind of challenges there are to figure out. There's a moving platform climbing puzzle, a face-off with an entertainingly fat sumo wrestler, a time challenge with a limited movement rock suit power, learning how to access secret levels by lining up sundials. By the way, this game has a day and night cycle, and if it's nighttime, the enemies are harder to kill. Thanks for the inspiration, Ocarina of Time. There's an exploration of a piece of ancient civilization behind a waterfall, and a tower climbing challenge that gives you all the classic obstacles of avoiding falling to your doom. Strangely, there's only one hidden level in this game, and it's in this first stage. Within that climbing challenge I was mentioning, there is a secret hanging climbing puzzle, which is weird given that all the other Wraith Hearts are contained within their own stages, but it was an interesting way to promote exploration. The hanging challenge really showed the age of the game in terms of hitboxes for climbable areas, though. Nothing worse than climbing up to a secret area just to almost complete a hidden puzzle and fall multiple times before finally getting it done. This was all part of the challenge of platformers from this small window of time, however. I really do miss games that mechanically did not hold your hand, because when you figured out how to complete a challenge, it felt like you were the one that actually did it. The aesthetic of this first level was a warm and welcoming outdoor area for the most part, and really got the player feeling comfortable before getting into more treacherous looking levels. Dragon Reach is the exact opposite of Timberdale in the sense that it is a dead wasteland. The giant dragon skeleton woven through the entire place, reaching into the heavens, makes for many interesting vertical traversals in this level. You make your way to the end of the skeleton's reaching claw to test your platforming skills once again. While getting up there, you are met with another Mario mechanic of climbing poles and jumping from one to another. This was also in the first level to a more minor extent, but it becomes a lot more noticeable in this one. So, yet again, you are testing the new take on movement mechanics with old tricks of design. You have the first face-off against shadow versions of yourself. You find an underwater puzzle down the various wells. You find a desert crypt with a Zelda-like 4-way step unlocking puzzle. You can try your hand at a new power-up platform that lets you take a glider across the sky. You revisit the rock power-up that you did in the previous level. And of course, you also find the secret level through the previous stage, but it's for this level, which is kind of weird in retrospect, especially since they only did it one time. I like how the design of the climbing puzzle changes the aesthetic of it to a more sandy wasteland feel. It almost feels like moving through time. This doesn't really make sense much given that the portals take you to different places around the same world at the same time, but it's fun to have a hidden level with a different take on it, so I can forgive it, I suppose. The second level takes what you learned and adds a couple variations of challenges you will find new versions of along the way. I like both of these stages as introductions to more complex levels as the game goes on. The Neverglades is the next level, and it does less to change the challenges, but offers an interesting insight into the history of the world. In it, we get to see the temple remains of the Asterian people, and inside these temple buildings, we get to traverse several giant murals that tell us the story of the wraiths invading the civilization of the people of Astaria. I always thought this was a cool bit of world building, tying the conflict to the world that we are traveling through. Tempest Peak Manor is the level that comes after, and this is a weird one given the world building so far. It's basically a giant mansion, but it has a bunch of modern accessories that don't seem to fit with the fantasy setting that we've seen so far. You literally have to play a video game by standing on a thumbstick on a giant controller. You jump into a sink, you navigate a fish tank, you find a heart in a Tupperware box, you traverse a grandfather clock, and even do one of those musical instruments secret platforming levels, kinda like that dream world in Battle for Bikini Bottom. You have to avoid getting eaten by a strange-looking dog on the ground as you travel to the different parts of the house. Overall, a very creative level, but it feels so out of place in a world that feels pre-industrial in many ways. I suppose it's ambiguous enough what era of time Vexx's people exist in, given that the invasion happened like 700 years ago. I think that's what it said in the intro.
700 years have passed. To my lasting sorrow, the terror continues.
But still strange to see an Xbox in a game where you're trying to save a magic staff from a dark wraith wizard. Next, we come to the level with the least arrow signs, the Below. This stage is basically the water level. It probably took me the longest to find all the challenges here than any other level, but after a while I saw that literally all the underwater caves had neon signs showing you what was in them. We get a rematch with Fatso, but on a stage that shrinks. This took me way too many attempts because he belly bumps you off the last tiny circle so easily. The newest challenge was probably the statue matching switch one, where you have a drone following you to make sure you don't push the wrong one. You know, between this and a traversal level up a large energy machine, maybe this does take place in a more technologically advanced era of time. F that climbing challenge, by the way, because if you fall into the water, there is absolutely no recovery, and it gives you this small moment of hope, and then you're like, oh wait, I can't save myself, oh well. The underwater volcano stuff was a nice change in visual style. The climbing puzzle was pretty standard, and you came into contact with more diversity of enemies, but god, those flying bastards really love to make you fail your climbing checks. Luckily for me, the game has uppercut mechanics. The pirates were a goofy bunch, and seeing them close up when you open the chest puzzle was nightmare fuel. The upside-down platforming challenge with inverted controls definitely never pissed me off at all, but was surprisingly easier than I remembered from my childhood playthrough, honestly. Overall, I like the exploration and the hidden coves of this level. It's simple and has plenty of average-tier challenges to overcome. Plus, how many games let you do this to get a collectible? Man, those Golden Vessel challenges really did get creative. Danger Crag is probably my least favorite stage of the bunch, simply because its aesthetic feels a lot like a retread of Dragon Reach. It has a wasteland vibe with old crypts and temples. The funny-looking one-eyed monk that makes this noise. is kind of a funny, notable moment, but the traversal in this level is just very linear and sucks to screw up on due to how far you can fall. The boss fight with the zombie was at least a nice change from the mechanics of the sumo wrestler, but it honestly did get pretty repetitive and made me want to end it just as soon as it began, really. The observatory challenge was really just a pain to set up, and the climbing inside of it really just reminded me of how much better Mario Sunshine was at hanging climbing mechanics. Summit of the Sages had some fun jumping puzzles in a variety of environments. It had a lot of converging elements in level design, which made me kind of anticipate what the last two levels would be, and reflect on where I had come from so far. The timed maze was fine, but the golden jar challenge just beyond it was so drawn out. Mostly because every time the revolving cube changed environments, it would loading screen for 10 seconds in between each room. This kind of got old after like the third loading screen. The idea was supposed to be a visual mindfuck, but ended up just taking way too long to grab 6 slightly out of reach objects. Carving out the face on the mountain definitely made me wonder what these sages meant to the old world of the game, and added more environmental story elements that made me intrigued about the history of the world just a little bit more. Frostbite Mill is, as you might have guessed from the name, the snow level. Slippery jumping puzzles while navigating Yeti-like monsters definitely keeps you on your toes. Who would have thought that snowballs would have the power to break large blocks of ice? I definitely think this is where the game trusts you enough to see what you learned up to this point from previous challenges, and can you get through the level with these skills. There is a rock power-up challenge, but this time you have to navigate a maze and use the power to break your way through before it expires. The glider challenge is by far the hardest to hit dead on, and failure means death every single time. It also has by far the hardest floating platform challenge, where the platforms flip over on you, and then to end it all, you have to wall jump on blocks of ice. Real icing on the cake, guys. Okay, I apologize for that one. But anyway, both this and the glider challenges were the two that I had to come back to after beating the game because of how many attempts they took me, but it did feel good to get both of those hearts. The Citadel of Shadow is basically an optional challenge stage. You get to go to the headquarters, I believe, of the Wraith operations, and it definitely matches that Shadow aesthetic pretty well. The platforming is just hard all around in this stage. Everywhere you need to get to involves rotating doom that you need to jump on, over, or past. Everything wants to kill you, and the gold vessels are literally just spread out all over the whole stage as a final fuck you to completionists. I did not get those, but I did complete all the unique level challenges, except the secret level where you had to follow the momentum of the moving platforms. That last sundial challenge just really fucking pissed me off. But luckily you only need to get 60 hearts to get to the last boss fight, which you can do well before even the last two levels if you get basically all the hearts on the levels before them. But that of course leads us to the end of the game, and oh boy is this one of the most frustrating bosses in platforming history. I hate this boss because it takes the most locked-in focus of almost any boss battle that I've ever done. I'm talking Souls-like concentration on this motherfucker, and I've beaten most Souls bosses faster. This dude was literally impossible for me to beat without some modded cheat assistance on my emulator. Thank God I was not playing on my actual GameCube. Unfortunately, since I was playing the GameCube version, it has no invincibility cheats, unlike the Xbox and PlayStation 2 counterparts. And, you know, like normally I don't like to do invincibility cheats, but that's how annoying this last boss was. I just kind of wanted to get to the end. At the end of the day, the best I could do was unlimited lives and unlimited special move charges. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Vexx also does that thing that most games did at the time, where if you kill enough enemies, it increases this bar of energy that eventually you get to use a power-up on that lets you shoot blasts of energy from your claws. This power-up is extremely helpful in taking out the Wraith enemies that crawl and burrow out of hit range. The first phase of this battle is literally just fighting off these Wraith minions while the Dark Lord laughs at you from the sidelines. He also starts to rain down fire on you after taking out a couple batches of Wraiths. Without the power-up blasts, it takes forever to take out like 5 waves of these things. They really only die if you hit them like 3 times, I think, and there's like 8 per wave. It's really annoying, guys. Luckily, some of them drop health when they die, giving you a chance to recharge your 6 health meter slots. With the unlimited blasts unlocked, you can get through this phase pretty quick, but phase 2, oh my god, phase 2 is literally the worst piece of ass. Not only are there no checkpoints after phase 1, but every attack that Yuba in his monster form lands on you does 2 damage instead of 1. That brings your 6 health point bar down to 3. And yes, the bad guy's name is Yuba, I forgot to mention that. None of the characters' names matter that much, they're pretty one-dimensional, whatever. On top of this, you have to avoid 2 different types of attacks that can happen before he tries to grab you. One of those created a shockwave that you need to jump away from in order not to get hit by it. After dodging his grab, you need to stun him with a punch, get underneath him, uppercut him so he flips over, and then downward energy blast his stomach before he recovers. And he recovers a little bit faster than is convenient sometimes, so getting that energy blast time perfectly is really annoying, especially after you recover from him flipping over, and the interactive mechanics between you and getting on his body are a little f***ed up, so yeah, it's just really complicated. But every time you do this, he recovers and jumps into the air to try to land on you. If you do not jump out of the way at just the right time, you will take 2 damage. You have to do this not once, not twice, not even 3 times. You have to do this 5 fucking times in a row. Mind you, we are still in phase 2 out of 3 phases of a boss battle with no checkpoints. After that, you basically kill some more Wraiths to recover health, then deflect fireballs back at him from 5 different towers that he pulls out of the ground. Then you deflect 1 more at him on ground level before finally triggering the last cutscene. And then you get to watch Yuba sink down into the Shadow Realm where he belongs as he does his overdramatic monologue. I shit you not that it probably took me like 4 hours to complete this boss. I can't imagine a kid in the age demographic when this game first came out finishing this game without days of practice. Despite all the bullshit I just had to go through, I did it. With enough persistence, I was able to do something extremely challenging and get to that last cutscene of a platforming game from 2003. That's why I think this game is slept on and deserves some recognition. It takes foundational developed concepts from games with much more creativity and storytelling and creates something that really pushes you to master the mechanics of a really tightly designed experience. Learning timing, jumping techniques, and boss dodging mechanics all lead to a culmination of your talents that you're able to take to the end. You can really identify with this weak little nobody that had to struggle and adapt to the tools that he found in order to become a force of nature that could overcome an unfair fight. Whether that be getting to the top of a climbing challenge, overcoming the obstacles of linear traversal, or taking down a near impossible 3-phase death monster, you really feel the value of persistence. It is a feeling that you felt with most platformers of this era. One that didn't hold your hand and force you to play a specific way, or auto-correct you into certain mechanical pathways. Vexx gives you a limited yet versatile tool belt, and it's up to you if you can master those tools or not. Does it have some design jank? Of course it does. But what platforming banger didn't back in the day? This title tries to create a unique and interesting world full of challenges that make you feel accomplished for overcoming them. As typical as the storytelling elements are, we get a fun mix of design elements from other titles that at least attempt to craft their own identity. There is environmental storytelling. and ancient or mysterious vibes to each level that make you ask even more questions about the history of the world that it tries to create. It also has a really fun vocal performance from legendary actor Brian Cox in the form of the villain Yuba.
We don't want to rule it. We intend to devour it.
He really hams it up and matches the camp of the early 2000s cartoonish action-adventure style made for kind of that teenage demographic. I didn't even mention Nelson Everhart's wonderful score for the game. And yes, it's kind of ironic that his last name is Everhart in a game about collecting hearts. I didn't really think about that till writing this, that's kind of funny. But from the tranquil Waterfall Castle track to the somber tones of the Below, and the intriguing adventurous theme itself, it takes you on a mood-altering adventure that makes you wonder what is around the corner. Holds a spot in gaming history as something that is uniquely challenging and creative in a way in its approach to an overplayed genre in its time. And that is why I think this is the most underrated platformer of the 6th generation of consoles. Thanks for watching, everyone. Sorry I have been fairly inactive lately. School and work have been keeping me busy, and I wanted to make something with a little bit more substance than the shorter videos that I've been cramming in there from time to time. Let me know what your experiences with this game were back in the day, if you played it. If you're old like me and you played it back in the day. But if you never heard of it, I hope you found a unique piece of gaming history to keep you entertained. If you enjoyed my retrospective, a like would be appreciated to help this video reach other platforming enthusiasts. If you want to see what else I have to say about games and entertainment, subscribe for videos in the future and to be able to come back to other things in my current library. Hope you all have a great day, and thank you for coming to the Dutch Ritz Party.